I think if you're starting a venture fund today, first of all, a lot of whiskey would be important, and sprinkle in some yoga, and then it's what's your differentiation? Why are you different? What are you going to bring that's different than what we have today?
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Demo Day, the podcast for entrepreneurs and venture capitalists, where we demystify the culture of joining one of the top accelerator, incubator, or VC funds from around the world. I'm your host, Sean Goldfaden from Coefficient Labs, and on this episode, we are interviewing Rick Smith from everyone at Coefficient Labs. Enjoy the episode. Rick, thank you so much for joining us on your second episode of Demo Day.
Wow, number 2. All right, let's do it.
Number 2, in person. The last time we chatted, it was during COVID. It was over a Zoom call, so it's really great to have you in the hot seat here, and we're excited to kind of continue the conversation we had. I think what's great about Demo Day is we get a chance to hear from you around really like what it is that you're looking for in founders, not just that you want to invest in, but how you maintain the relationships, how you help them achieve their goals. And there's also a big cohort of our listeners that are, junior investors. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're an associate, principal, and they think maybe someday they want to start their own fund, they want to grow. And so it's awesome to have your, perspective here. And I just appreciate you coming back on the show.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. We've Crosscut's had a good long-term relationship with you guys. Coefficient Labs done a great amount of work for us, with us over the years. Really do appreciate the friendship and the support you've given us in the community. So appreciate you, and thanks for having me here.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And there are dozens and dozens of VCs that we've worked with over the years, but there's something about the relationship I have with you, with Brian, with Brett, Masha, Ali, Kia, like the whole team has always felt like, my uncles, my family within this. And it's been interesting because we're a bootstrapped company. We don't traditionally fall in that venture bracket, but you guys have always brought us in, let us work out of your offices, helped out. And it's just been super awesome to watch us grow together over the years. So again, stoked to have you here. One of the things I wanted to start with, VC is having such an evolution right now. Mm-hmm. The industries that are hot yesterday are different than today. Mm-hmm. Growth and getting new LPs is an ever-evolving part of this game. And, Crosscut in particular has had an evolution over these last, 6 months, 12 months. Mm-hmm. We had the opportunity to go to your big event, day before Upfront Summit. You guys had the coolest party. And I just wanted to, get an update around, where Crosscut is today, where you're at today. And I think as we dig deeper and peel back the layers of the investments and how other, VCs, maybe you can just bring us up to speed of where you're at now and what you're most excited about over these next 12, 24 months.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So yeah, Crosscut, we've had a long history here in LA. We started off back in 2008 and really started Crosscut because we thought we saw something unique in Los Angeles. There was a very nascent venture market here back then, and it wasn't being served by a lot of local money. And Brian Garrett, my co-founder at Crosscut, and I had worked together at a prior firm in LA, and we thought it was a good time to kind of branch out and do our own fund. So he and I started working together in 2001 at this point, which is older than Ethan sitting over here probably. And then we, started Crosscut in 2008. And so we've been at this a long time. So we've had 5 funds at Crosscut. About a year ago, as I was looking at my career and sort of where Crosscut was and where I was, I had gone to the guys and said, I need to sort of pull back a little bit. I really love what I do. I think this is the best job. I've always said, other than being a left-handed starting pitcher for the Dodgers, I don't think there's a better job in LA than being a venture capitalist here and being able to be part of the ride that we've all been able to experience the last 16 or so years for us at Crosscut. But these are also long-term funds, and I'm still managing out Crosscut One. Wow. We still have an investment in there, Gum, which has done very well, but that's 2008. So it is I think you have to really look at this as if you're a seed fund or pre-seed fund, it's a 13 to 15 year commitment really, or more to keep managing this out. And, where I was in my life, I said, I think this is probably time for me to reduce my role in the next fund, which is Crosscut 6. I'm still happy to be a senior advisor to that fund and to Brian, which I am there. And we did a very kind of cross-cut thing. And Brian's has always been kind of an instigator of this. We brought someone in and say, let's, because we've been good partners and good friends for that period of time, 16 years. Let's bring now 17. Let's bring someone in to help us figure out how to kind of have this conscious decoupling or reorganizing of the fund. So we did that, and one of the things that it focused on was the I. He's like, okay, what do each of us want individually? And then we get together and okay, I spent time with each of you individually. Let's figure out what you want as a partnership, and it really just made things that were smooth anyway even smoother. And it was, and to Brian's credit, we've done these introspective things over the years where we get together, we do offsites, and we, 5 minutes in, we're in tears because someone's talking about, losing a dad or whatever, and how that's affecting them, where they are, how it's affected you as a partner. So I think there's probably lots of different ways to transition people around, but I think we did it in a pretty thoughtful way.
If you don't mind, I feel like this is something so many people can learn from, maybe not necessarily in the, partnership, but it could be in having a conversation with a parent. It could be in, bringing back an old relationship. But can you kind of describe as if what was the framework that you went through in this? You were talking about an I versus Can you explain a little bit for people that are like, wait, how do you have such a thoughtful conversation? There must have been emotion and fear and all of these things. So if you were to describe like the process you went through, could you explain it for maybe how others could get value from it as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first step is figuring out what each of us want individually, right? Because we are, every organization, every partnership, every marriage, whatever it may be, you have individuals are coming together to form a team. But the first step really is you can't really talk about team until you figure out the individual. And so it was a fair amount of work. Just know, Rick, what do you want? Not do you want in the context of Crosscut, what do you want in life for the next 15 years? And that,
did you have a process even just for that question?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That was the first step. The first month was that. The first month was meeting with an outside consultant who came in and knew us well and just said, no, I'm just meeting with each person one-on-one. Tell me, Rick, what do you really want? And we, gave us homework before, where have you been? Where are you now? Where do you want to be? And it's, it just, I think we should do that regardless, right? You should do that at any time. But I think in a time like this, it really is, let's figure out what, each of us want, what we really want for the next, part of our lives. Because each of us had hit age 50. I was the leader in that race, unfortunately. And so it was a good time, I think, to be reflective. I mean, to me, midlife crisis is midlife opportunity. It really is a time to stop and say, what have I accomplished in my life? What am I doing now? And is that really what I want to do going forward? I had the benefit too of reading a couple books that were helpful. One was called From Strength to Strength, which is really interesting as you get older and, your brain changes, plasticity changes, but also just, your skill set and what you like to do and what you're good at can change as well. And that was a helpful book for me to kind of get a sense of, wait, this really is a different arc. And I think the sooner you realize that we can't keep doing what we've been doing forever. Father Time is undefeated all time, right? He always wins. And so the sooner we realize at some point we do have a different arc of our life that we can create, and not just be, not just have happen to us, but actually create a different arc that's going to be different. When I started working as a lawyer in 1987, a long time ago, I could outwork anybody, and I can't do that today. Or I don't have a desire to do that today. I still probably work too hard, but I could just doubling down on hours worked is not what's going to make me, happy or successful in for the next 10 years. So each of us went through that process, and that's not easy. I mean, it really is if you stop and, and think about it. So each of us did that first, and then we came with the conversation separately to say, okay, well, what do you want for the firm? And then we brought everyone together and say, okay, this is, where I am.
Wow. So it was almost like a 3-part, like
it was
myself for the company, and then
yeah. And then, so when you come into that, we've already, have a sense of what we want for ourselves. It's not done on the fly, and it's not reactive. It is thoughtful. And so for us, like I said, it was as smooth as it could be.
Wow.
And we have a lot of respect for each other, so I wouldn't expect anything different. But still, it's emotional stuff. And to say, look, guys, I just don't want to be part of the partnership in the same way that we've been doing this. That's hard. I also read, so the second book I read, one was From Strength to Strength. The other one was Annie Duke's book called Quit.
The poker player?
Yes. The Power of Walking Away. And a lot of the concepts in there are going to be familiar to folks that read it, but the way she talks about the importance of understanding how hard it is to walk away, and she puts in terms, I mean, overall of poker players, it's something like good poker players walk away from 50% of their hands. Great poker players, professional, walk away from like 3/4. I don't know if that's exactly right, but but why is it so hard to walk away? Sunk cost fallacy. I've been doing this, I've been working this way for 15 years, or in that case, I have a lot of money in the pot already. That really shouldn't affect the odds of you winning or not. But, we have our identity that's tied up in this. I'm Rick Smith, Crosscut Ventures. What am I if I'm not that, and it's just, there's a whole bunch of things that go on there. So for me, because I'm 10 years older than these guys, it was an important part for me to kind of figure out, wait, it really is time to make this change. And change is never easy, but it was time.
Wow. What amazing advice. I think I find myself feeling that sense of calmness when I'm prepped for my team one-on-ones versus when I just jump into a team one-on-one, and that there's so much subconsciously swirling around with identity and how many years and who
go and all that stuff,
without having this space to kind of unwind a little of that pressure. Sometimes in those moments it comes out and then it all of a sudden turns into a negative experience instead of one where you can look and be like, that was actually it was a positive experience. Totally. Yeah. It's amazing. Obviously I want to ask the question around okay, if you could do it all over again, how would you have done it different? But why don't I start with the flip side? What's one memory that comes to mind over the last 15 years that just brings a smile to your face, that makes you think of the essence of the team that you work so hard to really cultivate?
Yeah. So, boy, there's so many memories over the time. I would say, one that stands out maybe is we worked, Crosscut One was a $5 million fund in 2008. If you recall, 2008 and 9 were the worst years.
Not good years.
In venture history, in my experience anyway, in my 25 or so years. So those years were tough. We had made 6 or 7 investments. You could not raise capital in 2009. It was so tough. Every one of our companies made it. They gutted it out. They reduced burn. They whatever. Just to stay alive. Our average pre-money, by the way, and median pre-money in that fund was 1.8 million. So it was different times. But those companies made it through. But we weren't sure if we were going to make it through. And I was going around and talking to Mark Schuster at Upfront or other places. I said, hey, do you have a spot for Brian? I was trying to find, because he was my junior guy that we became, partners at Crosscut, but I still felt like I was his mentor. And the answer was, no, not in 2009 or 10. There's no place to go. But then we kept trying to fundraise, and Steve Case, the founder of AOL, who started just turned into Rise of the Rest, which is really funding innovation outside of Silicon Valley. Didn't have that alliteration back then. It was just Steve Case trying to, spur thoughtful innovation outside of that little area of San Francisco, and saw us and said, "I want to lead your next fund." And it was that moment that we knew, after sort of 2 or 3 years of thinking we weren't going to have another fund and we were going to have to do something else, that we were going to have Fund 2. And I remember doing, it's been told different ways over time, but I did a little jig on top of the desk when we found out he was coming in and leading, and became, he's a founder of AOL, just a really successful but thoughtful investor, and it certainly added fuel to, allowed us to raise Fund 2. Forget about fuel. It allowed us to raise Fund 2, which then allowed us to raise Fund 3, which is our first institutional fund, and kind of off to the races. But every company, I think every startup has some kind of pivotal point where if it goes one way, it's going to lead to a result that's negative. If it goes one way, it leads to a result that's positive. That was one that went our way. So that really kind of set the stage for the next, in that case, next 13 years of investing.
Was there any learning or takeaway, or 30 years later, you can almost look back, was it blind luck? Was it you were, I was listening to Naval Ravikant talking about how there's this different types of luck, and, one is blind, and one could just be like, you're having so many meetings and so much pitching, and you're just cultivating this kind of like, luck almost finds its way to you. Was it a feeling of luck? Was there a learning that you look back and be like, it was these things that got us to that pivotal moment? What's your thought, if any at all, on like, what does it mean to other founders from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I never discount. It's funny, I haven't really thought about the different kinds of luck, but I never discounted the importance of luck in success, right? Mm-hmm. That's certainly part of it. Now, we can create better chances for luck by working hard and working smart and putting ourselves in the right places. In that case for us, we had been looking for probably 2.5 years to try to, find someone who will do Fund 2 for us. And we were doing all kinds of things. And that was a conference that we're at in Hawaii where we happened to run into Steve Case. So,
wow,
but we were there. We weren't giving up. We weren't, stopping. We were still putting ourselves out there and still trying to create our own luck, I guess, in that case. So I think, you can't count on luck, but you can count on the fact it's probably going to take a little bit of luck or fortune or, kind of twists of something to allow anything to be super successful. And for us, it was just continuing to stay at it and being at the right conference at the right time when others, or we could have just given up, and we worked 7 years without covering our personal cost. I mean, it was we were lucky enough, we were a little bit older. We had had a little bit of success that we were able to fund that lifestyle. But it's, back to your earlier question, starting a fund, it is tough to have a first-time fund. I mean, it's just hard, especially when it's as small as ours was back then.
Wow. Well, I'm excited to get your perspective on, building a small first-time fund. I know there's a lot, especially in today's world with the micro funds and the first-time funds and emerging managers, if you will. But to go back to, Gum Gum and that first early class of 2009, and like, you've now had this chance to see at least 2 of these cycles of like, holy shit, what's going to happen in the industry. Now that you've had a chance to balance between these are poor founders, this is a good founder, and these are the great ones, the ones that can really make it through the hardest of times. Have you distilled down certain traits that when you look back at the teams that are still chugging along or have gotten that acquisition, is there specific traits that you find that differentiate a good investment from a bad investment? I'm sorry, a great investment from a good investment.
Well, I would kind of great investment is one that just worked out really well. And that could be a lot of things other than the founder. But I think as far as the founders go, I mean, I just think of Jason Nazar that we've backed twice, that is very well known here in LA. He's just a very he epitomizes, I think, what you're looking for in a founder. He's very passionate about what he's doing, but he's also dispassionate when he needs to be. He can be, coldly rational. He's always thinking of ways to make things better. He does something that's interesting. He will ask for opinions, but then make his own decision. And he may get 5 out of 5 board members saying, I would not do that, and he might still do it. But he's educating himself. He's taking that all in. And I think JFK may have done the same thing. He sort of took all the information but made his own decision that may have gone against majority of the information they took in. I like that in the CEO. I think CEO at the end of the day, for better or for worse, they're the ones that are going to have to make the tough calls. And we're just VCs. We have in our case dozens of different companies that we're as a firm anyway involved in. And we're not involved in that one company day to day, unlike the CEO. And we weren't there, when that first, most likely, we weren't there when that first idea first germinated up. And so, I think the best CEOs are the ones that just are able to take that, run hard, not be afraid to make mistakes, not be afraid to also tell boards or other constituencies that things aren't going well, because that way you can get information. You can, bring us in. I understand when you're fundraising, you got to put a good foot forward all the time. But once we're in, we're all in it together. And the CEO that can come to say, Rick, it's not working out like we thought. And okay, well, let's figure out what might be better. Those, to me, are the best chances a company has to be successful. Still may not make it there, but this is all about just trying to increase the odds that eventually the airplane can take off and get some lift.
Yeah, I had a fascinating conversation about this with TX Zhu over at FICA, where he was saying that what they did is they brought someone in to analyze all of their best, most successful deals and gave different markers and different, weights around, like, is this a first-time founder or have they already exited? Is it a solo or a 2 or 3? And they used all these different markers. Do you know the one trait, the only single pattern they found amongst their top 1%ers?
Yeah, love to know.
The response time of emails being under an hour, or to some extent, I'm paraphrasing, but it was essentially the only trait was that these are overly responsive founders, and that their quickness to respond to VCs, to their customers, to their employees. I found that to just be a really interesting
trait. That's fascinating.
Yeah,
I could see that. I could see that trait being important. And I will say the best relationships anywhere are the ones where the CEOs are responsive, because I think it's not because they're responding back, obviously, that makes them good, but it's that you're my teammate, and you're my maybe boss in a way. But if you're on the board, you are the boss. But hey, I'm going to be responsive to you like I am, to anyone else. And if they're doing that to you, they're probably doing that to customers,
right? Maybe
potential hires, maybe potential partnerships. So it is that the sense, and part of that, it falls under just the rubric of sense of urgency. At the end of the day, startups, the one commodity that's valuable is money, only because that leads to time, right? You only have a short amount of time to see if the airplane can take off or not. It's not, you don't have years and years to kind of see if this works for most of the businesses in which we invest. So that sense of urgency is really important, and that's maybe an indicator of that.
Now, over time, I'm sure, it's just so cool to talk to you because of the length you've been in this industry. What are the non-negotiables that you formed over time? Because at an earlier stage, you don't always have all of the data. Sometimes this is not a founder you've invested in the past. And so what are some of your non-negotiables that maybe others could at least take to heart if they haven't thought about it in that way before?
Yeah, I'd like to say there's not a lot, because we have, I always want, there's not one type of entrepreneur out there that we're going to back. And so I want to make sure if entrepreneurs are looking at this, that, hey, even if you don't look like, the mold you think what an entrepreneur look like, you may still get backed and should still get backed. I think some of the basics are, and we touched on some of these, but I do love it when a founder CEO says, I don't know, right? Because you can't know. We're investing in inherently risky businesses, right? It's just, and anyone who says, who projects that they know all that is going to happen, it's not reasonable. It's not rational. So for me, I love to have a CEO who's willing to say, I don't know, right? And that's sometimes hard for going to say younger CEO. Maybe it's hard for all of us to say, I don't know, right? But that's part of it. I think the ability to communicate, be transparent, that's really important to us. We're gonna be in this foxhole for a long time with you. This is a long-term relationship, as I've said before, longer than the average marriage, or at least the happy part of the typical marriage. So, this is a long-term relationship. We are getting into this thing with you. We got to be able to make sure that we understand each other and transparent with each other. That's a two-way street. VCs aren't the best communicators in the world, right? There's VC speak, and so it really is. Are we copacetic? Are we good together? And maybe we're both fine with other people, but hey, as a team, or do we talk the same language? So, to me, that's really important. It is. There's got to be a passion there, and that passion can come up in a lot of ways, but it's often driven by a chip on the shoulder of some kind. I wouldn't say it's a non-negotiable, but it's certainly helpful. If you looked at our investments over the years, there's probably, I know there's not a lot of Harvard MBAs in there. It's just, it is more, people that have had to sort of scrap and fight in their life. And maybe those are just the kind that end up in front of us. But I really like to see that, someone with something to prove. They haven't been handed everything in their life. They know they got to sort of make it on their own. But also, it can go too far, and you got to wear a lot of hats as a CEO, but you also have to understand you got to build a team. And I think that, especially early on when resources are tight, and you can't just, hire all the people you want to hire, those first few hires are really important. So when we're sitting down with the CEO and founder and talking about, what key areas do you want to hire into, how they talk about that, and the team they want to build, what are you missing the most in your own background, or how you see yourself at this company, how are we going to help you fill that? Those kind of conversations early on say a lot about the relationship we're going to have. And so that becomes a non-negotiable in a way. And I will say, as an aside, when we talk about price and valuation, that is for sure, it's a negotiation, but it's also a courtship. How are you responding in this kind of relatively adversarial, situation? Because you're on one side and the other.
Totally.
Everything we get, you don't get. I will say the CEOs that tend to be, and we tend to be very fair, I think. So, because we know that the more equity the founding team has, we think anyway, the harder they're going to work and the more success they're going to create for themselves. If we see founders that are a little bit too, I guess, careful on valuations, I don't know the right way to say it, like, really digging in too much, there's some concern there because, eventually you're going to have to open up the company and the kimono to other people. You're going to want to hire the VP of sales or whatever. And if they're that, stingy on equity now, are you going to be stingy on equity later when that person can really help you? giving 3/4 of a point to a VP of sales could create a lot of value for you. You're going to lose someone in that. So all of that courtship, it's important. It's not the same every time. And so it's kind of hard to articulate, but you kind of know it when you see it after, if you've been doing this for a while.
Within that regard, and we can certainly move on, are there certain mistakes that you see founders making where you're like, man, if I could just, it's so simple. You guys just, what's maybe one thing that can be a blind spot, even with, again, if they're getting in front of your desk, they're ambitious, they've got a great idea, they see a different world than the majority of people. And so they've got some of the sauce, but what's a blind spot? What's something that like you see often again and again, especially as like things are becoming so competitive? What's something that you would say kind of boils up to the surface?
It's just my personality, but hubris doesn't work for me. Arrogance doesn't work for me. I think for a lot of people, I understand that may be a reaction to being insecure, and so come across as maybe overly arrogant and cocksure. But that just doesn't fly, and it's not the kind of relationship I care to go into. So, you can be confident, but there's some fine line there, and I think there's maybe some sense that the CEO's got to be right all the time, and it just doesn't. That doesn't.
The give and the take has to be, because I think it's sometimes I will talk to like just coming out of school founders, and they just like, it's hard for them to conceptualize a gum that launched 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And that like there's so much adversity on the course of 15 years. Now, you've said before that really like getting a quick no from a VC is almost like it's like a second
best
best
answer.
The second best. Now, getting told no to your idea is tough. It's hard for anyone, especially when you're like, no, you don't get it. Is there, in your opinion, a right way versus a wrong way to accept the no as a founder? And then what do you want to see? I would imagine that there's at least one or two times a no doesn't mean no forever, but potentially down the road. So, I'm the founder. I'm gonna role play with you here, and I'm sitting down and I give you my pitch, and you're like, hey, I appreciate you, but it's just not for us. This is gonna be a no. What do you want me to do as a founder that is the right way to go about it?
Yeah. Are we in person or email?
Your choice. Let's say over email, you sent me an email that said, hey, we're a no.
Yeah. Well, I first of all, like luck, there's all kinds of no's. And it really depends on how long we've been communicating, because you figure we estimate that we see 4,000 business plans a year. Wow. We meet with 400 companies, 40 companies present, and we do 10 deals a year. That was our sort of loose metrics at Crosscut. And so there's just to maintain sense of our schedule and to be able to help our portfolio companies and else, we can't, unfortunately, spend the time we'd love to spend on why it's a no, right? So but to me, it's proportionate to the amount of time we spent with the entrepreneur. The more time I spend with you, the more elaboration I'm going to give you when I say no, right? And if it's one where if you take that, well, let's take the easier example. If it's not a lot of time and we say no, then it probably means that it's just for a lot of reasons that may have nothing to do with the company. We just can't engage right now. Maybe we're too busy on other stuff or whatever. In that situation, just an acknowledgement of thank you for the time. We understand whatever and move on. That's that is fine. When I say we've spent some time and say no, and the CEO doesn't respond at all, those stand out. I mean, it's not happened 5 or 6 times, but I'm like, I assume they got the email, and I assume they just got so PO'd that they didn't want to respond. But that's not a good thing to do.
What does it make you feel so that when people, if people do that, they're like, oh shit, I didn't know that. That's how I come off.
Right. Well, that's a great point. It just makes you feel. I mean, if I went through the effort to say no, at least it's thank you for your time or whatever. If you don't say that, it either makes me think you're the super pissed off at something. I'm like, it's like this is part of the game. Unfortunately, that we see so many deals we have to pass, or maybe you don't know how to behave in business, or maybe like to me, it's just courtesy. It's not really. Mm-hmm. It's a lack of courtesy, to not respond back. Just by the way, like it would be, a lot of VCs are bad at this, and we try to do a better job. But for VCs not to be responsive to companies, and believe me, that happens a lot more than the other way around. So, and I would only say to entrepreneurs that aren't getting responses out of VCs, we just tend to get a lot of
inundated.
Yeah,
there's too much supply and not enough of you.
Yes,
your team.
And so again, though, it is very dependent on how much time we spend together to how responsive your VC should be. Right. So if we spend some time together and then there's a blackout in communication for 3 weeks, that's not cool. Right. And so, I think the hardest part on the entrepreneur side is, our companies are raising money all the time. They're asking me, when do I reach out? They seem interested, and now they're not. What's the right cadence to push a VC, and every VC is going to be different on that. I do think we can be gently pushed. We can't be pushed in. I'm talking about the industry. We can't be pushed into doing a deal we don't want to do. But I think you can kind of reprioritize for a VC. Hey, especially if you have an event. Hey, I do have I think a term sheet coming in. It is, if you are interested in this, Mr. and Miss VC, it's time to kind of jump in. Those I appreciate those timing cues, because it does help me as I'm trying to
Yeah, because in sales, sometimes you just never know.
Right.
What are your thoughts on the call it the VC update email? Like, I got to give a special shout out to Charlie Green over at Remento. I don't know if you've ever worked with them, but I don't know how I ended up on his investor update, but I get them and I think to myself, like, wow, what a really thoughtful, useful way of keeping, VCs or anyone up to date, especially when there's success. Do you put any weight towards it? Do you want to see, like, if you said no to a founder and then they said, hey, Rick, would it be okay with you in the next 6 months or year? I kept you updated on our metrics. Do you want to see the dots, or do you feel like it's a, hey, I said I don't want to date right now, so give me a minute.
Swipe right, swipe left. Yeah, I don't want to see it. I think in part because we're a seed investor, and in a year, if you're successful, you're probably going to be raising an A, and it's just sort of out of our realm. There's certainly some exceptions to that.
Right.
And there's certain times I would say, look, it's just not right now. Well, if I say it's not right now for us, but I would take a look at this in 6 months. If you do, and I want to go back to what you were talking before and maybe tie it all together.
Yeah.
If I've spent more time with the company, my passage should be, if I'm clicking right, these are the 2 or 3 reasons why we're passing. And some of those might be things you can't do anything about. I just a different opinion on what the market's going to be or what the competition is or whatever. Some of them, though, may be, look, I have doubts whether you can maybe close a customer, but if you can close a couple customers, then that will show me, oh, the dogs are eating the dog food here, and that might be, worth looking at. Yeah. So, depending on what those reasons are, it may be worth re-engaging. I guess given where we are, just a number of companies at this pre-CC level, those update emails tend to just get deleted because I'm just trying to get control of my inbox. So for me, it's not real helpful unless I say, yeah, I absolutely, I want to hear.
Now, I mean, certainly.
And by the way, I think everyone's going to be different on that.
Of course.
And if I were a little later investor, it's like, yeah, I want to see more progress along the way, maybe. So
now, with where you're at, both in your career and it's such an interesting place because so much of AI is getting pushed into the startups that are looking for money. But there's also this kind of notion of like, oh, wow, like, do you envision AI being able to automatically, review business plans and, oh, I have a model from the company, let me just upload it. Like, do you foresee AI playing a major role, a small role? Is it something that you're like, I don't care. I don't even want to really, it's like, I'm not at that part of my life where I'm like, if I went to my dad being like, hey, AI's going to do these, like, I don't care.
Right.
And so where do you feel AI plays a role? And like, do you see VCs in the future of VC, like really, because like that problem of I'm a 3-person team and I have 4,000 that's never going to necessarily just go away. And there's now so many VCs. And so I'm curious, do you see it happening? Is it something you're like excited to watch from the sideline, or what's your philosophy on it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, AI is here to stay. That's number one. It's amazing what some of the progress we're seeing and some of the way our companies are using AI. Yeah, but I would say, at the seed level or pre-seed level, the early stages of venture. To be successful, it's top of funnel. The number of companies that you see has got to be quality too, right? It's not just numbers; it's quality. Quality of companies you see, which is driven largely by relationships. It's relationships with other entrepreneurs, relationships with other VCs, relationships with industry people, and there's really no substitute for that. The best 99.9% of the companies we've ever invested in were referred in by someone we knew for the most part, right? I mean, there are some exceptions here and there, but we knew the VC, we knew the entrepreneur, we said a warm introduction. So to the extent that AI can help, maybe maintain a bigger network, by better email catch-ups, or whatever, maybe updates that we send out to people. At the end of the day, it really is those relationships that matter the most, and reputation. You put those together. So there's really not a great way I can think of to shortcut that. It's not really looking at the business plan. It really is, at the end of the day, the business plan's got to be good, but the entrepreneur has got to be great. And I'm not sure there's a way, to do that. Yeah, it's interesting on, maybe email response time is one indicator that is important. But and by the way, I'm also smart enough and old enough to know that I'm probably completely wrong. And 5 years from now, people are going to look at this and go, "Oh, Rick, you didn't see this coming."
Right, right.
It could be out there, but at least the way that venture's been done in my time period, it is those relationships that are driving those connections, that are driving the warm introductions, that then that's the incoming. On the analysis of it, so many of the markets that our companies are going after are $0 billion markets. Like, we think they're going to be big, but they're not big now. And so I have a hard time understanding how AI might be helpful there. Certainly can help on researching markets and stuff, but in these, sort of brand new cases, it's just hard.
Yeah. It'll be really interesting to see how and where it ends up playing itself out. When you think about Crosscut, and this is, to almost move more into, junior VCs, associates, people that want to start their own fund and look at you as like, okay, Rick he was a lawyer and then he started his own thing. When you think about Crosscut, what is one thing that you think you guys have done incredibly well as a fund that others could learn from? And maybe what's one thing that you would have really done different, in that, like, using you as a beacon of a lesson? What's something that future, partners or future fund managers, one thing that you thought you did amazing at, and one thing that you would have completely scrapped all over if you could?
Yeah. Good questions. I think, to have a venture fund, you have to raise money. So you're in that case, you're a startup, and so I think you need to go into it like thinking, as I did with Crosscut. Crosscut is my startup, right? So you have to have startup mentality. You need money to be a venture capitalist. You can't invest if you don't have money. That's really simple stuff. How do you get money? The easiest way to do that is have something that's differentiated. And so one of the things that we did right is that we foresaw that LA was going to become a big market. Did we see it was going to be the second or third biggest market in the world? No, we didn't. But we thought we did see a lot of good things happening. And like any startup, we saw some good things happening. We saw a hole in the market, and we wanted to fill that hole. So I think if you're starting a venture fund today, first of all, a lot of whiskey would be important, and sprinkle in some yoga. And then it's, what's your differentiation? Because your investors, your LPs, your limited partners, I can tell you, because I'm in conversations with them quite a bit, at least institutions these days, they really need to see a differentiation. Why are you different? What are you going to bring that's different than what we have today? And that's one thing that we did right by choosing LA and saying we are the seed fund of LA. Back in the day when there just wasn't a lot of money here, and it wasn't clear that LA was going to become what it did. So we did that right. I would say the thing that we did a lot of things wrong, but the one thing that I'm advising a fund called Revenant. It's a new fund, super sharp guy with a great top of funnel, knows a lot of SpaceX people. Engineers, they're doing some really interesting things. First time fund, but has a lot of backing, knows a lot of people in the industry, in the right places in the industry, focus on sort of frontier tech, right? And the one thing I think he's really doing right is taking big bets. Now, I knew we had to do that at Crosscut, but it's still hard to get yourself to do that. Swing for a double, good. Trying to leg out a triple, okay, that doesn't work. You got to swing for the home run, because it really is, and I knew this going in, it really is the one or two deals out of 25 in any fund you're going to do that drive the returns of the fund and will drive your next fund. And still it's easier and you can sleep a little better at night if you invest in something that's still a bet, but it's still risky, but it's got some revenue momentum and whatever. It's just, it's easier. But I can tell you, if you don't get those outsized returns, it's just really hard, in this business. It's a slugging percentage business, not a batting average business. You just have to have these outsized winners. And I would say, of our ability to really dial that up, and there's a couple examples I can point to, but we saw the deal. We're like, well, that's a big risk. Well, yeah, that's what we should be doing. So I would advise, I guess, anyone to really, swing for the fences. Now, it doesn't mean be reckless, but it does mean it's really got to be big if it's successful. And
does that mean putting in more money? Does it mean if you're only used to making 10 investments, making 20? Like what is?
I still think you need portfolio theory. So you still need, because this is really hard. But it's just the meaning you need to have
some quantity.
You need to have 15 or 20 hit at bats at least, I think, in a fund so it's not really necessarily concentrated positions, because it's just really hard. And I just know that there's going to be some mistakes. They're not mistakes, but there's zeros. And right team, good bet, just didn't work. That's sort of the business that we're in. But the ones that succeed, they got to be really industry defining companies, and that's where I think my natural instinct as growing up in the Midwest, parents were product of the Depression, lawyer. I think me overcoming, I would say I spent too much time figuring out what could go wrong instead of spending more time figuring out what could go right when we look at a company. And my partners,
I was about to say,
those guys.
I feel like that's the perfect, because I'm like, wait, Brian has to be the guy that's like, it's gonna go right.
Right. He's the D1 athlete that is gonna be successful no matter what and all that stuff. But there needs to be some balance there, right? There needs to be a balance. And Brett's the same way. He's unfailingly optimistic. And so I think what worked well for us is that we did have those differences there, but the different lenses there that worked well together. I don't think one or the other was right or wrong, but together it worked well. But you do have to, and if you're a solo GP, add tequila to the whiskey and yoga, because it's just hard. It's hard to lone wolf it. It's just hard. Who's going to check you on stuff? And if you're going to do that, get some advisors around you and listen to them. Make your own decisions, but listen to them, because it's hard to be solo. At least I do. A lot of institutions don't like to see solo GPs out there, just for that reason. There's just like,
and the size of the network. Like if you have two or three,
you're doubling, you're tripling. And I will also say, one of the things that got caught up with us, I think over time, we didn't do a good enough job of reacting to, is that the over time, if you're successful, you're gonna have more and more funds like we did. We got 150 investments we made. The process. There's a danger the process can become the job. That it's like, especially for me, I was doing the administrative work and the chief investment officer work and the chief legal work, whatever. It's
chief
like,
HR or whatever.
Yeah, all that stuff. I tended to gravitate. That tended to fall on my plate, and trying to create some opportunities for Brian and Brett to have more time. But that became, I probably should have gotten more help earlier on that stuff, over time. Fund 1, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Fund 3 and 4, I think, it's something to think about over time, adding, finance people to the staff or other administrative folks.
Now, your business is all about, or not all about, but in the process of saying no to companies that you said, it's like some are on the fence. Is this the big bet? Now that you've had opportunity pass you by, you've said no, or you've missed out on deals that maybe you're like, damn it, I should have taken the swing there. Was there any learnings or any lessons that you've taken from not investing in certain businesses, good or bad? I think that like you said, there's this natural, on one side, you're like, I got to go for the big thing. On the other side, you're like, I don't want to fail on my first go. From my understanding, Yipeng Zhao from Embark told us how, like, when you're a founder, there's almost slightly a badge of when you're Jason Nazar, not every single startup is going to work, some don't, you fail, and your ability to come back is kind of like part of the journey.
Yep.
Whereas in VC, if you're a first-time fund manager and you don't have a big win, you're never getting a follow-on investment. You're not getting to fund two. And there's that fear of like, if I don't make the right decision, I'm going to lose everything for the rest of my investing life. And so, there have been some times where you've made the right decision to pass and some that you've made the wrong. Has there been any learnings just, passively over the last 20, 30 years that you've realized about missing out on some deals, good or bad?
Well, there's a lot of things in there. Yeah, sure. Well, one thing is second guessing is not allowed at Crosscut, right? It's just and I don't think any VC out there should ever second guess in the sense of, oh, we should have done that, or we shouldn't have done that deal.
No, woulda, shoulda, couldas.
No. Now, what should happen is, did we number one see the deal, right? If there's a deal that happens you didn't see, okay, why didn't you see the deal? Especially if it's in your backyard or in your specialty or what in your network that you should have seen it. So seeing the deal's number one. Number two, passing on a deal, that's fine, even if it does well. I really don't lose sleep over that. I don't. If we followed our process, right? Was it the kind of deal for us? Is it the kind of deal that we think we could add value? Was it an entrepreneur that we liked? If you follow that and it still results in you passing on a deal that does well, that's just kind of the business that we're in, right? I mean, as long as we're seeing the deals, and if you see a lot of deals, I can't drive down the road without seeing companies, or go to the doctor without seeing companies that I passed on. Figs, I passed on. It was, Scrubs. We could invest it at, I don't know, 10 million pre. It was worth 4 or 5 billion at one point. So, and I wonder why my blood pressure may be up every time I go to the doctor. It's like, you're wearing effing figs. I could have bought a bigger house and faster car if I invested in that. But, and so I think part of that is, it is part of the nature of the game. Don't second guess, but analyze. Anytime a company fails that we've invested in, we'll go back and, okay, did we, do the right thing? We'll do a postmortem on it. And if we passed on a company, why did we pass? Did we do the right thing or not? If we didn't, then let's adjust that. And one of the things that I think that we realized I think you're exactly right. I remember back in Fund One, I'd be like, God, if I was Sequoia, I could take this bet because if it fails, I'm not out of business. Mm-hmm. Whereas if we failed on too many, we were going to be out of business. And part of it too, there's some art there. If you fail too fast and it's evident when you're trying to raise fund two, they're gonna have a hard time. If companies look like they're
zombies.
They're zombies. Well, okay, whatever. It's just all of this. We have to be in the top quartile to be able to raise the next fund. I mean, depending on the market. But so, how do you get there? There is some give and take on that, on, the risk that we take. But I can tell you, if you can somehow take those bigger risks, I think you're going to be happy over time.
Now, I've got a friend right now that's building a company, and he is constantly talking to ChatGPT, and he's saying, if there's this many of this company and this big of a market, and how much am I going to be worth? And the conversations are really like trying to almost pump him up around the opportunity, the idea, etc. But when it comes to fundraising, it comes to, for a first-time fund manager that's starting to raise money, given today's ecosystem, what's a misconception that people have? They go, oh, this must be easy, right? I invest, I get my uncle to give me some money. I invest in 10 AI companies. We're going to be a millionaire. And in your opinion, what's a misconception about fundraising today? It doesn't even have to be LPs. It could also just be founders. What's just a misconception around fundraising in 2025 that maybe didn't exist in 22 or 21 or 20 or whatever, let's call the hot year was? What are you seeing at the ground floor, and what should founders and potential partners at VC funds be ready for in this fundraising ecosystem?
Boy, misconception. Well, I think, it's been around for a long, I don't know if it's different than 2020 than 2025, but I've always said it's really easy to be a venture capitalist. It's really hard to be a good one, right? So if you get money, you can put money out and you kind of feel good, and you go to cocktail parties and you can talk about the investment I made in some AI company. It's really hard to get that money back at a multiple. And so I think perception probably 5 years ago was, well, everyone can make money, so let's go in. Today, the misconception may be, well, it must be easier now, because maybe there's less competition or whatever. It's always hard to make money in venture, I think. There are times where it's easier, and there's times where you make money maybe when you shouldn't. And there's other times where, there's, our companies maybe should be getting funded and they aren't. And there's always some balance there. But I think, I think a common misconception today too is just that you largely only hear about the winners. You don't hear about everything else. And so it feels like, if you're just looking at some of especially the AI companies these days, it feels like everything's been a success. It's just not that easy, And by the way, even if it's successful as a company, it's only successful for the venture capitalist if you get in at the right valuation, right? It's a combination of market and product and team and valuation. And if any of those are off, especially the valuation going in, it's going to be hard to drive the returns for the fund that you're going to need. And so just being in the right company, the quote unquote right company, if you don't get in at the right valuation, it's not gonna matter. It's like by the way, it's a nice logo slide. And if you're building, some advice I give to younger funds is sometimes it's okay to get a NASCAR slide, the ones with the logo up there. So yeah, I'm actually invested in XYZ company, even if it maybe not be the exact timing you would have gotten in ideally, but okay, I'm in the flow. I get these kind of companies. Next time I'll get in at the C level, not the B, Series B, later stage investment. So I think all of those things have to happen, and it's hard to be successful over time in VC.
If you were the up and coming hustler, the new GP that you just met, or you're like in your zone of like I'm early days, I'm grinding, is your recommendation as a mentor to that junior potential someday investor, is the advice like get your logos first, whatever you need to do, get in and then start to build position later? Or is it balance the two and recognize that, if you care about what people actually care about, it's going to be the return, and therefore, so what would you say is most important in the early 1 to 3 years?
Yeah, it's got to be some balance, because at the end of the day, you want to prove that the model is going to work. So if your model is getting at the seed level because you have great contacts across SpaceX or whatever it is, then you have to prove that the preponderance of the companies in the portfolio are those companies. But if an opportunity comes along that you can invest in a Series A or B of a pretty hot nuclear company, and you can get in that, okay, let's add that to the slide deck. That's helpful. Really, as a talking point of, look, I see a lot of opportunity. It's also a talking point if you're a young fund and a smaller fund to say, look, I will have SPV or follow-on opportunities, whether it's my portfolio or just the network I have. And so all of that, you put that in the primordial soup and you mix it up and add a little salt and whatever. And there's some balance there I think is necessary. But for the most part, you should be investing in your core. And that's because your fund 1 drives fund 3. The returns off of fund 1 drive fund 3. Fund 2 is still, there's not going to be a lot of certainly money back in fund 1 if you're an early stage fund. And there's going to be fewer indicia of success in that fund, but those indicia are going to include name brand funds coming in next. It's the follow-on round that was done, the new customer that was added. It's all of that will give you the best chance to raise fund 2. It's all about getting to fund 2, because if you're fund 1 successful, you'll get fund 3 raised. Institutions will come in and fund. Oftentimes institutions will come in 3 because they've seen the success in 1. You got to get 1 raised. Okay, maybe you can do that because you're a hustle, people, whatever. Fund 2 is kind of that critical.
2 is the hardest The hardest hump.
And that's, you go back to the thing that one of the things I remember the most was when the green light from Steve Case and Fund 2. It was like, okay, we are actually in business, and we're only going to stay in business if we deserve to. It was, and that deserve is only if Fund 1 becomes a success, which for us it was a big success, and so that allowed us to raise Fund 3, 4, and 5.
Now, for associates and junior VC associates, like, I've had the chance to watch many of your teammates grow with you over these last 4 years, 5 years, whether it was Nick that came and then went on to Upfront, or Spencer or Masha or Ali, or like all these teammates I've got to watch from the crowd grow in the company.
Joe Gazelle.
Yeah, exactly. Now, within regards to, you've had the opportunity to grow talent around you. What do you want to see? What makes the best of your employees, your teammates stand out as a partner? Like, what do you want to see in the junior staff that when they're listening to this, they see as like a level up? Any qualities that you really want in that team?
Yeah, I mean, so we're a small fund, and unlike private equity funds, which tend to have fewer partners here and a bunch of people down here, most VC funds are inverted, where you have partners here and maybe fewer, professionals underneath. Or at least not the sort of the broad. So I think probably in that situation, if you're at an earlier stage fund like we are, it is just the eagerness to do everything, right? You're gonna be meeting with Crosscut anyway. You're meeting with companies by yourself, as in your first year with us, because that just helps us out, whatever. That's fun, and the tendency is, okay, I want to spend all my time going around and meeting with companies, because there's nothing more energizing than that. Meeting with these great entrepreneurs that are passionate about whatever it is they're doing. But also understand that we also have to get our quarterly reports out, and we have to, get our, we have to report, to our accountants, valuations for all our companies. There's a lot of, crap work in every company, and we're a small company, and so someone that comes in and says, I want to do everything that just helps you, and everything that takes, if you're not doing that, I'm doing it. And so anything that takes burden off the GPs and allows them to do their job better, that's the best attitude we have. I mean, almost everyone we've had, maybe it is everyone, I can't think of anyone that didn't come in with that kind of attitude of, we're gonna take whatever comes our way. We will do whatever work it is that will help the partner.
Not
grow.
Above it or beneath it.
No, because believe me, we didn't have someone at the start, and I was doing all that, or we were all doing all that. All the GPs were doing that.
In your 20 to 30 year career, what's one belief about venture capital that you've completely changed your mind on since day one?
When I first started in venture, I probably put too much emphasis on the idea itself. I knew the management team was a part of that, but probably in part because I started investing in the late 90s when there was a lot of the plumbing of the internet, and so there was gigabit Ethernet switches. We were evaluating stuff, and so it was kind of very technical kind of stuff. And I think I probably thought back then that, okay, if it works better, it's going to be a successful company. And I do not believe that today. I will take an A team and a B idea anytime. I would say another thing that I have been disabused of since I started investing is the ability of most VCs to make a difference in a company. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of VCs over the years, and it allowed me. And when I first started, I thought, well, they've been experienced; they must know what they're doing. And a lot of them were harmful to the company. And so somewhere over that time, I went from he's on the Midas list of VCs, and yet he seems to be hurting the company, to taking the Hippocratic Oath, which is the first thing a VC board member can do is do no harm. Because if we don't know the company that well, we know the markets and we know a lot of things about where a company might have to be to raise the next round. And yes, we can be helpful there, but to come in and just kind of say, hey, have you guys thought about doing this, and then leaving, that I saw that be more destructive over time. So I would say we would joke, and it's maybe not that far off, that if we're adding value to a company, they're in trouble. Because at the end of the day, we are there to support the CEO and the team, not be the CEO or really a big part of the team. It is, we're obviously all working together, but the day-to-day stuff, that's really not our job. And I probably thought early on that no, VCs can have that impact, and it's probably not the case.
Now, with the future ahead of you and your, the opportunities, this new chapter, there's so much that you can lean into. Before kind of moving into that, what do you hope your legacy is leaving behind? If over this next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you have this opportunity to, look back on a career well built and deserved, what do you hope your legacy is amongst the founders, the VCs, the partners, the vendors, everyone that's worked with you? Anything come to mind?
I haven't thought about that. I guess it's time to. What time is it? Time to think about legacy. So I would say we wanted to be a catalyst for change in LA. I still love LA. I still love Los Angeles. It was my adopted city, but I've been out here a long time. And we wanted to improve drastically the startup ecosystem here. And I think we've done a good job of doing that by, in part, being some of the first money that's sort of in the latest wave of investing in Crosscut. Not latest, meaning not in the 80s and 90s when there was a little bit of venture going on here, but very little. But being a catalyst for that by doing a lot of community events that had no real ROI to us other than just the bigger the community, the better. The friendships we developed over that time. Mark Schuster, I saw Dana Settle yesterday. It's just there's just a lot of the early days here were a lot different than it is today, and we could all the VCs could get together. Probably can't see this table, but a table a little bit bigger than this, and have 6 or 7 VCs, and we could chat and share deal flow. That's we've come a long way from there. So I think being a part of that and making LA what it is, as far as being friendly towards entrepreneurs, certainly I like to think we played some role in that. And then with the companies, it's we try to be honest and transparent with them. I've done some when a company went under, what could I have done better, kind of stuff, and for the most part, most of the CEOs say, hey, you called it like you see it. And I try to be honest and forthright with them, because I know, again, it's an industry that has challenges in that. It's hard. It's not fun to be the guy or gal that rains on everyone's parade. And 99% of the time you're raining on someone's parade by saying, we're not going to be investing. And that's just hard it's so much more fun to say, we're in, let's go, let's build this. But that is part of our job, and how we do that, and to do it professionally and with grace, that's, I think, an important part of our job.
Rick, this has been an awesome episode. I've loved every second of it. I got to ask the final question. Now that you, especially with the book you read about leaving and almost shedding a chapter of your life and moving into a new, what are you most excited about? What are things that you haven't had a chance to do in the past that are on the board? What are, dreams or things that are just like pushing you into this next futuristic part of your life? What are you most excited about?
Well, I would say, to backtrack a little bit, I'm still managing Crosscuts 1 through 5. We have 70 some active companies in there, so that's taking a fair amount of time, and we are still. That's going to take years to see that through. So that's a nice base to have, and continuing to do that. Especially it's audit season right now. We're in March. As we record this, there's just a lot going on, right? So that still feels like there's a lot there. But the reality is, I'm going to have more time. I am looking forward on the professional side to continue to stay involved in the industry. I just love it and love to be helpful. I understand I'll be more of a mentor going forward, more of an advisor than in boots on the ground and stuff. But I'm looking forward to that role, and I've always loved helping people. I can now help them at a different level, and whether it's advising funds or companies or investors, I'm looking forward to that role going forward. on the personal side, I've had a pretty good life. I mean, I travel a lot, a great set of friends, great family. I mean, the tremendous dog, Hank.
We love you, buddy.
I got to shout out to Hank. I think, if anything, doing a lot of what I was doing, but with less guilt. For some reason, even though it's our own firm as a VC, there's part of me that just, if you're not working, a certain amount of hours or certain time, there's this overhanging guilt or drive, and trying to rein that back a little bit and say it's okay to relax, it's okay to take a break, it's okay to do nothing for an hour. I already read a lot. I very active, work out more. Yeah, sure. But just embrace that as part of my life rather than feel like I need to kind of push that in the 6 to 7 a.m. hour. Okay, it's okay to actually work out midday, whatever. It's just, it is creating a little bit of a different life than I've had for quite some time now. And that change is both daunting and exciting at the same time.
Well, I can't wait to be a part of whatever the next 10 plus years hold. You are truly an amazing part of the Coefficient Labs story and journey. Great client, great friend. Rick, we're super excited to have you. Thanks for coming on the show.
All right. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And everyone listening at home, I'm your host, Sean Goldfan from Coefficient Labs, and this is Demo Day. Peace, guys.